Hello everyone and welcome to today's Talk to Our Expert series. Today we're going to talk to you about how to manage approvals in Merlin. Here are our webinar guidelines. As usual, it's going to be short. I am recording it and you may ask your questions. They do not need to be related to today's topic. And of course, suggestions for future topics are always welcomed. So there are three different approval methods that you might consider using with your Merlin system. The simple approval system, simple approval method, complex approval, and a custom approval that you set up for yourselves. And we're going to talk about all three of these briefly, and then I'm going to show you how you might use these. In any case, an approval process is a way to either restrict content for users so that they can only see approved content, and we're going to show you that in our simple approval process, or it can be more complex where you need approvals of different types of individuals in order to publish content in different places. Maybe you need legal approval, or maybe you need design approval, and so those are all part of a more complex approval process. And then of course there's a custom approval process that you can set up, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. So for the simple approval process, we used to call this librarian checked, and it's still referred to that internally in the Merlin application. It's always been a part of Merlin as far back as I can remember. And it's a traditional way to reveal content to specified users. So think about it this way, that you have content coming in from all these different places, and you want to do a quick review on that content before you make it available to your broader audience. And you can do that with a simple checking of a box and setting up a filter so that your general users only see that librarian checked or that approved content. And I'm going to show you that. And this can be used to trigger an email alert to people, so you can let people know that there's content that either requires approval or content that has already been approved that they can look at. What's useful about it is it has its own icon in the metadata palette. Again, it's been part of the Merlin workflow for a number of years. And you can also have it trigger a color code in addition to the icon, and I'm going to show you that. But before we get to that, let's talk about the other types of approvals. The complex approval process uses our new dashboard functionality, and this allows you to set deadlines and select approvers from a list. And so these are people that are assigned to the role of approver, and you can actually request approvals. It automatically sends out emails and allows you to go in and monitor the status of either items that you have asked to be approved or items that you need to approve for someone else. And so the dashboard is useful for that, and it takes you straight away to the content so you can approve it right then and there. And it automatically updates the status of the item as it goes through this I have approved it or I have not approved it. And finally, we can talk about using a custom approval process. And this is where we can use existing tools. And you can create drop-down lists to pick a status of an item. And again, the value selected in the drop-down list may trigger emails. And of course, you could have color codes tied to this metadata as well. So at a glance, you know what the status is. And this means that content might have different states depending upon who's doing the approval and why they're doing the approval. So without further ado, let's quit our slideshow. And let's jump right into Merlin and show you how these three different approval processes might work. So at the very first, we talked about a very simple approval process. And what we're talking about is this checkbox that you see in the metadata palette. Okay? And you can see that for this item, it's checked. But if I go to this item, it's no longer checked. Okay? And this item traditionally has been labeled librarian, but more recently people have been renaming it approval, because that's basically what it does. I'm approving the content so that it may be viewed by other users in the system. And so to approve something, it could be a simple check the box and that item is now approved. And same thing, I can go to another item. You can see this one is already approved, as is this one. but it's real easy to go through and decide whether or not you want to check the box on content and mark it as approved or not. See, this one's not approved. I'm going to mark it as approved. Okay, so it's real easy to do that. That's one item at a time. If I want to change the approval status for multiple items, for example, I've got these 4 items selected, you can use the Edit Multiple tool, and again, choose the approved checkbox right here and say, yep, we'd like to select that, and just click Apply, and now it's marked all 4 of those items as being approved. Okay, so I can do it one at a time, or I can do a batch edit. Now, what does this mean to your end users? And so I'm going to show you that. So give me half a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of Merlin, and I'm going to log in as a new user who's only entitled to see approved content. Okay, so this particular user, notice I only have 2,613 items returned to this particular user. So out of my database of nearly 500,000 items, only 2,600 of these items have been set to approved. And so it doesn't matter how I search, whether I'm searching for photos or videos or graphics, I'm only going to be able to search across content that has been marked approved. And you'll notice all of these items, no matter what I click on in here, they all have the approval checkbox checked. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so as this particular user, I am restricted to only seeing approved content. And this is done by setting up a user filter on the server side. And this is something that you will need Merlin 1 customer service help with. But it will help you set up this type of workflow. It's very easy to do. It takes us all of about 2 minutes to do it. So we're happy to help you set that up if it's something that you're interested in having. Okay, so that's a little bit about the that approval process. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log back out. And I'm going to log back in as a higher level user again because I want to show you my dashboard and how I might manage approval in using my dashboard. Okay, and so what I can do is, this is my dashboard, and so if I need this item to be approved, I can use the approval button in my metadata palette, okay, or in my collections I also have an approval button. So if I want my best sports photos and I need that content approved, all I have to do is click the similar looking thumbs up icon, and I get a dialog that says, yep, I need to add an approval to this one. So I'm going to say I'd like to add an approval, and I can type in my request and complete this form. I can add a deadline. I can even choose a reviewer, and these users are all the ones that are set to be approvers in my particular system. And when I save this, it's going to send an email out to various individuals. Okay, so let's take a look at that. I'm going to go log into my email briefly. Okay, so we're looking at my email, and you can see that I've got an approval request from David B. And it was sent to me as a different user in this particular case. And you can see that it's added a new approval request for the particular asset with the Merlin ID of this. And it's asking if a site release is required to use this photo. And if I want to go see that particular item, all I have to do is click the link, and it's going to take me to Merlin and take me to the actual item that I'm supposed to approve. And here's the item, okay? And I can go to the dashboard for this particular item, and you can see that this one is waiting for my approval, okay? And so I can click my arrow here and say, yep, I'd like to go ahead and mark this one as approved, or I can reject it, and at the same time I can add a comment as well. No release needed. And when I click send, it's going to send an email to everyone else that is part of this approval thread. Okay, and so these are things that are awaiting my approval. And on the right hand side, these are things that I have asked to be approved by other users. Okay, and you can see that this one is pending, and this one is actually pending but then was rejected. Okay, so this one has already been turned down. So this gives you an at-a-glance status of all of your approvals, whether they're approvals that are waiting for you to approve them or whether they're approvals that you have asked someone else to approve, and so you can immediately go check on the status of those. Okay, so I wanted to show you that. That's a pretty nice thing to be able to take advantage of. So that's our approval workflow, and again, it works for individual items and it also works for entire collections of items if I wanted someone to go out and approve an entire collection of items. Okay, so if I go here to my landscapes and go to approvals, you can see that this one actually already has a pending approval request. Okay, so I'm able to see that at a glance. All right, so what I want to do now is, again, I want to log out and I want to log back in as a different user. And I want to show you a custom approval workflow that I set up. So again, I'm logging back in as that kind of simple user where I can only see approved content, but I want to show you what I've done here is I've set up a field called approval status, okay? And you can see that this item has been marked as approved for all uses, and notice I set a color code to it. It gets that green diamond shape in the lower part of the thumbnail that indicates that this one is approved for all uses, and this one, the approval status is blank, and so for a blank approval status you can set it to display nothing, or in this case I set it to display a gray triangle. Okay, but let's try changing the approval status. So I'm going to turn editing on, okay, and notice that my approval status, it's a pick list. Okay, and so as an admin user I can build this pick list, and so I've got this approved for internal use, and so if I select that and I'll go click off the item, notice my color code turns to yellow because it's the approval status is set to approved for internal use. Or if I say do not use, it's going to turn it to red status. And so, you know, at a glance, I know right away that I can't use this one because it has a red triangle. And if I hover over it, it tells me what the red triangle means, right? That it's do not use for my approval status. But notice it's got my approved checkbox set to true. So I could actually go in here and uncheck that as well, okay? And if I had permission to edit that, I could uncheck it and change it to being unedited, and it would actually disappear from view. So that's a little bit about how I've got my 3 different approval statuses. I've got my simple approval workflow, where I can check the box. I have my more complex approval workflow where I can set metadata set the approval using the approval icons in either metadata or in my collections palette, and then use my dashboard to view the status, or I can use this custom approval process like I've shown you. And to set some of this up, it requires a little bit of background work. So let me just show you where you might access some of these things as an admin user. So as an admin user, for my entitlements or my permissions, one of the entitlements I have is now called a simple approval workflow, or a simple approval. So let's just choose the group approved only. Actually, let's choose my admin group. And you can see as an admin user, I have permission to do all of these things, okay? But here's my simple approval permission. So in order to access the simple approval permission, this is where I need to go to turn that on, okay? And that allows me to have access to the librarian check, okay? So that's a little bit about that. The other thing that I did is I made that pick list, you might recall. I created a pick list. I used the field column name and for my approved only group, and I added these 4 values to it. So these are the 4 values that I created. And then I went into my color codes, and for that approved only group, I set the color codes so that if the column name saw these particular values in it, it would display a color-coded triangle that represents the status. So that's a little bit about my approval workflow. If you have any questions about helping to set this up, please let me know. We're happy to do it. And I look forward to seeing you everybody in January. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, everybody. Have a good day.